and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. US President Joe Biden has ordered an in-depth investigation into alleged Russian interference in the 2020 election. He also directed for probes into the large-scale cyber attack on the US government agencies and Moscow's use of chemical weapons against opposition leader Alexei Navalny. But Washington has indicated willingness to extend a New START treaty with Russia by 5 years. US President Joe Biden has unveiled a wartime strategy to combat COVID-19 as the country's death toll from the virus approaches 410,000. Mexico has reported a record of over 1,800 single-day deaths as its tally exceeded 144,000. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered over 1,700 cases and 47 new deaths, taking the toll over 11,000. Globally, the virus has claimed 2,088,000 lives and infected nearly 97.5 million. ISIS has claimed responsibility for twin suicide attacks in Iraq's capital city of Baghdad. At least 32 people were killed and over 100 wounded in the blast at a crowded market in Tehran Square. In India, protesting farmers have rejected a government proposal to put the implementation of agricultural laws on hold for 18 months. They insisted that the government should roll back the contentious laws completely. In the English Premier League, champions Liverpool have suffered a shock 1-0 defeat to lowly Burnley, ending their 68-match unbeaten home record. An 83rd minute penalty from Ashley Barnes decided the contest after he was brought down by goalkeeper Alisson Becker. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. US President Joe Biden has ordered an in-depth investigation into alleged Russian interference in the 2020 election. In a White House briefing, Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Biden also directed for a probe into the cyber attack on US government agencies. He also called for investigating Moscow's use of chemical weapons against opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Psaki said Biden has tasked the intelligence community with assessing alleged Russian bounties on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. She said the U.S. administration is working to hold Russia to account for its reckless and adversarial actions, but Washington has indicated willingness to extend the New START treaty with Russia by 5 years. Psaki said Biden believes that the treaty is in line with U.S. national security interests. U.S. President Joe Biden has unveiled a wartime strategy to combat COVID-19 as the country's death toll from the virus approaches 410,000. Mexico has reported a record of over 1,800 single-day deaths as the tally exceeds 144,000. Globally, the virus has claimed 2,088,000 lives and infected nearly 97.5 million.
The world is once again drawing the curtain on normalcy as record surge of COVID-19 forces fresh restrictions. Brazil has cancelled the Rio Carnival due to the second wave of the outbreak, which has gathered steam with scarce vaccine supplies. ICUs in the three biggest cities of Colombia have run out of capacity. Meanwhile, the closure of vaccine hubs and postponement of appointments have left New Yorkers in a state of frustration. The city's mayor has asked the federal government to allow the use of reserved second doses as first doses as the vaccines run out. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden has announced a 10-step plan that includes expanding testing, vaccinations, and increasing mask wearing.
Let me be very clear. Things are going to continue to get worse before they get better. The memorial we held 2 nights ago will not be our last one, unfortunately. The death toll will likely top 500,000 next month. The cases will continue to mount. We didn't get into this mess overnight, and it's going to take months for us to turn things around. But let me be equally clear. We will get through this.
In Europe, the frustration over Pfizer's unexpected cut in supplies grows as the US drug maker halved the volume of vaccines for some countries. Meanwhile, Portugal has suspended all flights to and from Britain as it scrambles to tackle the rapid spread of the new variant. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has raised fears that tough COVID-19 restrictions will continue well into the spring and maybe even beyond. Over in the EU, Brussels says it will mark COVID-19 hotspots as dark red to implement harsher restrictions on such zones.
So we propose that a newly introduced category of dark red, a dark red zone, would show that in this zone the virus is circulating at a very high level. Persons traveling from dark red areas could be required to do a test before departure, as well as to undergo quarantine after arrival.
In Asia, Beijing has launched mass COVID-19 testing in parts of the city as China battles the worst outbreak since March 2020. Meanwhile, South Korea's struggle to contain the virus continues, with new cases dipping under 400.
Now moving on to Pakistan has recorded another 47 deaths from COVID-19 overnight. This pushes the toll to 11,204. Health officials say 1,745 infections were detected in the last 24 hours. The tally of cases has risen over 528,000, while more than 482,000 people have recovered. There are more than 34,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. Meanwhile, 2 more vaccine manufacturers have contacted Pakistan's drug authority. The health ministry says Russia's Gamaleya Institute has applied for emergency use of its Sputnik V vaccine in Pakistan. And another Chinese firm, Longcom Biopharmaceuticals, has applied for phase 3 clinical trials. In India, opposition parties have called for a probe into the leaked WhatsApp chats of controversial TV anchor Arnab Goswami. Shashi Tharoor, a leading Congress lawmaker, said the messages required a serious inquiry by the Modi government. Tharoor said the ultra-nationalist anchor celebrated the deaths of 40 soldiers and said, "We won like crazy." He slammed the fraudulent manipulation of television rating points and the leaking of military secrets for commercial benefit. Meanwhile, Shiv Sena has also asked the Bharatiya Janata Party government to take action against the Republic TV anchor. The Taliban say Beijing has expressed hope to strengthen economic ties with Afghanistan after the country achieves peace and stability. In a series of tweets, a Taliban spokesperson said their leaders met the Chinese ambassador to Qatar, Zhao Jian, in Doha. Mohammad Naim said the Mullah Abdul Ghani brother-led delegation discussed intra-Afghan talks and implementation of the Doha Pact. Brother requested Zhao to aid Afghans in vaccinating and containing COVID-19. He said the Chinese ambassador reaffirmed full support of Beijing to the process of intra-Afghan negotiations. In Iraq, the Prime Minister has vowed an earth-shattering response to ISIS bombings in the capital city of Baghdad. ISIS earlier claimed responsibility for twin suicide attacks at a crowded market which killed at least 32 people. In a tweet, Prime Minister Mustafa al-Khadimi said the evil leaders of ISIS will face a force to be reckoned with. He said the Iraqi people have proven resolve in the face of ISIS terrorism, and their will to live is a message of unparalleled courage. Earlier, al-Khadimi sacked key security and police commanders after an urgent meeting. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged Iraqis to reject any attempts to spread fear and violence. Syria says its air defenses have intercepted Israeli projectiles in the western central governorate of Hamas. Syrian state media said most of the incoming missiles were shot down. Damascus said Israeli forces launched a barrage of missiles from over the Lebanese city of Tripoli. Israel's airstrikes in Syria have increased in recent weeks. Earlier, an Israeli air raid in southeast Syria killed dozens of civilians. The European Union says ties with Turkey are on a better footing after a year of tense relations. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said this ahead of a meeting with Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu in Brussels. The two sides pressed each other to take concrete steps to improve relations. Borrell hailed Ankara's decision to restart dialogue with Greece over hydrocarbons in the Mediterranean. He added that there must be a sustainable de-escalation in the eastern Mediterranean.
Recently, we have seen from both parts an improvement on the overall atmosphere and some important steps, and this meeting today is also an important step on the direction of looking for a mutual strategic interest, the development of a cooperative and reciprocal relationship.
For his part, Cavusoglu said Brussels and Ankara must work together for a positive agenda. He said the two should increase cooperation in the fight against terrorism, irregular migration and Islamophobia in Europe. And now moving on to Central African Republic has declared a 15-day state of emergency amid attempts by rebels to blockade the capital, Bangui. This follows a surge in attacks by armed groups seeking to overturn the December 27 presidential election. A presidential spokesperson said the state of emergency will allow authorities to make arrests without going through national prosecutors. In light of the rising violence, the UN envoy to the country urged the Security Council to deploy more peacekeepers. On January 13, the rebels launched two simultaneous attacks on Bangui, which were rebuffed by the UN mission. The country's constitutional court declared President Faustin Archange Touadéra the winner on Monday. Cuba is hopeful that U.S. President Joe Biden will reverse his predecessor's hardline approach toward the island. In an interview, a senior Cuban official said Havana expects Biden to resume the policy of reconciliation begun by the Obama administration. Havana's diplomat in charge of U.S. relations, Carlos Fernandez de Cosio, said Biden's pledges suggest he wants to restart talks. He said Biden's team has more experience than any other in the past 60 years. Before assuming office, Biden vowed to reverse policies on Havana, which he said inflicted harm on Cubans. Former President Donald Trump took over 200 measures to reinforce a decades-old trade and travel embargo on Cuba. Now moving on to Ukraine, 15 people have been killed and 11 others injured in a nursing home fire in the eastern town of Kharkiv. Rescue officials say the fire broke out on the second floor of a building with 33 people inside. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked the Interior Ministry to open an inquiry into the incident. The Prosecutor General said the preliminary cause of the tragedy was careless handling of electric heating devices. Deadly fires are common in Ukraine, where compliance with safety regulations is poorly enforced. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Canada, Governor General Julie Payette has resigned amid allegations of workplace harassment. Payette resigned just hours after officials received the results of an independent probe into reports of verbal abuse and bullying by her. In a statement, Payette said no formal complaints or official grievances were made during her tenure, but Payette added she took the allegations seriously. In his statement, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he had received her resignation. He said every employee in the Government of Canada has the right to work in a safe and healthy environment. The Canadian government says Chief Justice of the Supreme Court Richard Wagner will temporarily fill the position. Google has threatened to remove its search engine from Australia if it is forced to share royalties with news publishers. Canberra is introducing a landmark law to make Google and Facebook pay media outlets for their news content. Google Australia Managing Director Mel Silva told a Senate hearing that the laws were unworkable. This drew a sharp response from Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Morrison said his government remained committed to progressing the laws through Parliament this year. He asserted that Australia makes the rules for things you can do in Australia and lawmakers will not yield to threats. In Peru, archaeologists have discovered tombs containing the remains of children thought to have belonged to the Incan societal elite. Experts carried out the excavations in the boundaries of a 500-year-old northern archaeological site. More in this report.
Peru is home to hundreds of ancient archaeological sites. Experts have now discovered tombs at the Huaca de las Abejas complex in the region of Lambayeque. Historians believe the complex, which is made of clay pyramids, formed an administrative and ceremonial center around 1100 AD. They dug up the remains of two children thought to have belonged to the Incan elite. They were able to gain further certainty on the date the children were entombed by studying sedimentation under their tombs.
We have found the burials of two children with the llama. These remains were found under a sedimentation layer which was revealed after it rained. We believe the archaeological remains are approximately 500 years old from the Inca culture.
Archaeologists have so far uncovered the remains of 49 people. They say the remains of a llama were also found nearby, along with ceramic utensils known to be used by the elite. The Incas domesticated the camelid to provide them with meat and wool.
The way these people were buried show they had some level of importance. The remains unearthed belonged to people from a high middle rank. They were people from the Inca elite.
The Incas dominated the southern part of the continent from southern Ecuador and Colombia to central Chile 500 years ago.
Now moving on to the business stories, talks in the Asia-Pacific have declined over rising COVID-19 cases in the region, especially in China. They're also monitoring the threat of new restrictions and an economic slowdown. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is leading the losses after tumbling close to 1.5%. Mainland Chinese stocks have slipped nearly 0.5%, with both the Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen Component declining. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index have also shared nearly 0.5%. The Kospi in South Korea and Australia's ASX 200 have edged down marginally. And now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.